As the American government recovered from the Great Depression, the New Deal introduced the Federal Housing Administration, which insured mortgages, dropped interest rates, and down payments for homes. Despite this, the FHA created a rating system from A to D that excluded the C and D areas, which are marked as yellow and red, from receiving these benefits, which exclusively denied African Americans from such privileges. After years of being denied home ownership because of slavery, the system of redlining did a very similar thing, and African Americans were left with nothing to do but move into supposedly undesirable neighborhoods or inhabit the soon-to-be crime-ridden and dilapidated system of public housing that was also introduced as a part of the New Deal. This conspiracy against the prosperity of blacks in America on the part of the government clumped African Americans into pockets of poverty, crime, and segregation. This cycle of poverty stagnated mobility, which established the lack of taxpayer dollars flowing through the modern-day public school systems in these neighborhoods, most of which are still inhabited by minorities and African Americans. The practice was completely legal until 1968 and resulted in years of economic stagnation for black communities that is still felt to this day. This conspiracy to maintain black poverty not only extends through education and housing, it also extends into our completely rigged criminal justice system, which is a result of not only poverty and a lack of education, but a concerted effort on the part of corporations and the American government to keep black bodies in prison for the financial gain of a few. The American criminal justice system has been designed in a similar way to the housing and education systems, to keep African Americans at the bottom of America's societal totem pole. Lyndon Johnson's war on crime led to businesses becoming involved in the prison system. Corporate lobbying was established, and the link between business and prison was cemented. Nixon then created his own war on drugs, much of which was due to the fear of the civil rights movement and black mobility, and soon after, Ronald Reagan doubled down on this with his own version, this one looking even more like a war than the previous one. By the 1980s, black bodies began to truly pile up in prisons, and when the dust settled just recently and numbers began to stagnate in 2008, there were 2.3 million people incarcerated, compared to 333,000 in 1970 when this cycle of black incarceration began. The U.S. has never seen such a massive rise in prison population. This was directly linked to business interests and corporations lobbying and putting money in the pockets of lawmakers to peddle their agendas, as incarceration rates and crime rates have been proven to be completely uncorrelated. What this did was catastrophic to communities of color, especially the black communities. Millions of men and women were left voiceless in a political system already stacked against them because of felony disenfranchisement. Millions of children were left fatherless or motherless, or with their parents who could no longer provide for them because of an inability to find stable employment due to their status as criminals. This brings me to my last and possibly most impactful element of this multi-tiered system, which is employment. Africans arrived in this country centuries ago and built America on slave labor without a single penny of compensation. The financial oppression opened the doors for all the aforementioned types of institutionalized racism imposed on black communities, as money is the root of upward mobility in the United States. Like all of these forms of oppression, the financial oppression on communities of color has changed form repeatedly. Modern forms include statistically backed outright denial of job opportunities to black men and women. Black people receive 36% less callbacks on jobs than their white peers. Many black people are also denied employment before even applying, as the massive war on drugs and black freedom gave millions and millions of black people a criminal record that their white counterparts were just as qualified to receive based on actions. Because of this rigged system, were given a free pass. 9 in 10 employers require some sort of background check, which denies a disproportionate amount of black Americans a chance at employment, as 1 in 3 black men will go to jail or prison in their lifetime. The historic denial of employment, coupled with the housing systems that have kept black people in ghettos and third world poverty, has forced many black men to take up alternative means of employment, often in illegal industries, which again perpetuates the cycle of criminality and poverty. Education plays a massive role in this system, as without strong role models and modes of education, finding stable employment out of high school is a near impossibility, especially for the millions of black people that the education system has already betrayed in the form of massive dropout rates. While this system is clearly completely broken and rigged, many people think that simply voting Democratic or sharing their views on Twitter will wake up America enough to reverse this deviant cycle. Anyone who truly believes that simply voting and having your voice heard will be able to end centuries-long oppression of black people in America is sorely mistaken. At this point in the American government, as it has been for about 20 years, the interests of Americans are no more important than the interests of corporate lobbyists. And I see our generation as the only solution for America to get out of this dark time that it has been living in. And many of us have been able to ignore this because of our blinding privilege. I see the solution not in votes and Twitter campaigns or even mobilization, but in creating a new generation of radical political leaders with revolutionary ideas that can overhaul this false system of democracy that has been peddled to us since our first lesson on U.S. government. Now is the time for changing governments, and I urge everyone who is angry about any part of this to take action in the near future and become directly involved in politics.